Hello, my name is Peter Cinnamon and you're listening to a podcast which is all about the Irish League. And no, you're not alone. The league did get a touch weird this weekend, but I think I kind of dug it. Carrick Rangers posting a fourth loss in a row. Pretty peculiar. Glens losing to the Swifts after a nice little unbeaten run themselves. That was surprising. Larne failing to win for the second weekend in a row and losing to Ballymena at home. I'm still not 100% sure that actually happened, but what I can tell you for sure will happen is a review of all those weekend games. I'm also going to deep dive into the championship happenings so far this season and look ahead to some pivotal games coming our way fast in the top flight. So set yourself down, lock yourself in for this, your latest weekly edition of That There Kicking Match. Gotta be honest with you here early just to kick things off. Just want to temper expectations, and that is that probably going to be no ball boy related content on the podcast this week. It's quite literally the only thing anybody wanted to talk to me about over the past 5 days. I do podcasts, I do other things, but nope. Everybody wanted to talk about the ball boy video, and I appreciate all the crack that has encouraged, all the good spirit it's been taken in, and if you follow me online, thanks for the shares and the likes, and if you don't, it's a great chance for me to say, go follow me on all those social media platforms. It's Kick a Match on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and now TikTok. I don't understand how the algorithm let that video take off, but I opened up my phone after a couple of hours and punting it out with 0 followers, and it was crazy. So yeah, thanks for that. Wife very much enjoyed it. Pretty much the only thing she's ever enjoyed from Irish League football. And thanks for the follow if you do follow. But focusing on this week, big return on the podcast this time round. This man has covered more Irish League games than you've probably had hot Dungannon burgers. He is one of the most experienced Irish League reporters working today. It's your man, it's Barry Flynn.
Peter, I love that word experience. Maybe just say a reporter, but I'm happy to sort of give my tuppence worth anyway. Yes, it's great to be here. Great to be here.
Experience is a great word when you can call upon well over 20, almost 25 years of Irish League experience, knowledge. You've seen it here, there, and everywhere. You've put it down onto paper, and we'll talk about a forthcoming bit of writing from you later on in the podcast. But I think before we get into the games, it would be it's important, I think, just to touch upon a really significant bit of news, very sad bit of news that kind of rocked the league last week, and that was of the death of referee Keith Kennedy, so young. And what it really highlighted to me is that this thing we all love, Irish League football, it really unites us more than any kind of division. And I felt from all the tributes to him, just talking to other people, it really highlighted how much of a community we are across the country, loving football, going to games. And he was a part of hundreds, thousands of people's Saturdays, week in and week out.
Yeah, I think part of the general family that we are. I mean, we were all shocked when we heard the very sad news last week about Keith, and it's just been something like that, becomes news. It strikes you about how long you've known somebody like that and has been a part of every day, every Saturday or whatever. And I remember Keith coming in. He was a very young individual, and he made his way up to be one of the most respected referees in the Irish League. And I think David Jeffrey summed it up on Saturday in the Telegraph regarding the respect that Keith was held in. But there was 3 words Keith had to utter at David during a game. It was, David, that's enough. And that was it. You respected him. David Jeffrey, a lot of people wouldn't have said that to him or had the the ability to get away with that, but it showed Keith's sort of respect that he had from the sideline. But on Saturday, I was at Ards, and I witnessed an impeccable silence for Keith, and I felt for the referees and the officials, because this was part of their inner circle. And during that silence, I looked about Clondyboy Park, and you could see people, the respect that people had. And it was just in that silence that, we all remembered Keith, and we all sort of thought about him and his family. And across the whole league on Saturday, it was just showing the unity of purpose and the loss to local soccer that Keith has been.
And I know it's a total cliche, but I believe it. When weeks like this come around, it really highlights how small it can be and how important family and togetherness this really is. And I think the league this week at the community really shone off the pitch in light of, a really, really dark week. But to talk about the week that we have seen, I think just to have you in here, Barry, we might be in for a very interesting and unique season. Lots of topsy-turvy results, but 5-6 games in, there's been a few of these already. From looking back on the past 5-6 years where it's eventually found its form and found its groove, there is a chance this could be a very different Irish League season ahead of us.
I was listening to the results coming in, as I always do. They're in the background, and the Ballymena result just struck me up the face about how that victory at Larne has really opened up this league. Because, Larne go to Linfield on Saturday, and can you have a 6-pointer in the middle of September? I don't know. But there's that many question marks. And it has been said about, you're better to have the points in the bag than playing catch up. And Larne have done a fantastic job in Europe. But Linfield, they just do what Linfield do. They've won 4 of their 5 games. They've drawn 1. And it is early days, but you're looking at it going, my goodness, you've got a lot of permutations. A lot of the sides that started promisingly really 3 weeks in, Carrick Rangers, for example, and you can see the way the topsy-turviness is beginning to come in. But the battle at the top, Crusaders, there's the silent partner in all this under Declan Cadell, being very consistent, and Linfield out in front, Cliftonville there. But the big question mark is Larne. Will the pressure of Europe? They have the squad, I know that, but it's been a poor start by Larne so far this season. The bottom of the table, but I know they're still 3 games off whoever. But Saturday's game is amazing at this time of the season for Irish League football, and it could tell an awful lot about how this Premiership will go. Exciting, Peter, exciting.
I know they're infamously slow starters, but this is such a handicap that they're putting on themselves. There is ultimately only 38 games, and they have only played 2, of course, but last season, was it the 1 loss in the league, maybe 2? They've scraped by to get a 1-1 draw. Last weekend, they get beat by Ballymena at home at Inver Park, of all places. And they do have all these distractions, and that the headlines write itself in regards to how much this European run has maybe took their eye off the ball. And nothing will focus them quite like playing against what is supposed to be their biggest title rival in Linfield. But if it isn't clear enough, Larne have had their chance to warm up. They now need to get back on track and start getting results quickly and in a big way.
One of the issues that was raised about the Irish League clubs going into European football was that they weren't getting the games that other sides would be getting. But Larne have played consistently throughout Europe since about the middle of July, plenty of games there. But what is it psychologically that has occurred now going into the league? Okay, 2 games, you'll not read that into a season, and Tiernan will tell you they don't hand out trophies in September. But it's interesting. But let's give Ballymena the benefit here to say, look, they have bought Ben Kennedy, and he scored a hat-trick the week before. And the longer that game went on, you began to suspect that a set piece getting into the Larne box could turn that game on its head, and it did. And with 8 minutes to go or whatever, Larne were in panic mode, and they lost the 3 points. And Inver Park was a fortress. Every team that went there, you knew that nil would have been on the opposite side at the end of 90 minutes. But maybe it's a blip, Peter. We don't know. Tiernan's very shrewd. They have the squad, but it's been able to get that squad to go out and perform. And Ballymena's performance will give, other teams in the Irish League will basically know, hey, they're not unbeatable at this time. There's a lot going on in the background. But hey, let's talk about this again at Easter. But for us aficionados of local soccer, this is another conundrum at the early part of the season. And Saturday at Windsor Park, Larne could go and actually beat Linfield 3-0. They're capable of doing that. But, that'll tell us so much about the mindset of Larne and the mindset of Linfield. And Linfield will be looking at this game going, hey ho, let's sort of, the wounded animal here. Let's see what we can do. And that is the game of the day, Peter, by all means.
If Linfield doesn't focus the mind for those Larne players, I don't know what will, especially away from home. And usually actually Larne have showed up in those games against Linfield at Windsor Park. It's something where they've enjoyed the pressure. They've enjoyed the pressure it's put on their opponents, Linfield. And if they're going to be a big game team, then they have their chance to prove it to not only their fans, but the rest of the league. When that result came in, it put a shudder down the spine of half the managers in the league, and it had the other top half managers pumping their fists with joy, because results like this did not happen last season. It rarely happened the season before, and you highlighted the main reason they won this, and it's becoming Ben Kennedy's Ballymena. He is the man that is getting amongst the goals. He's helping, contributing to pretty much all of their goals so far. There was a huge amount of expectation for him going into Ballymena, and he's been hyped up as one of the best players in the league for a number of years, and rarely do you see a player at that peak point in his career go from a team that's at the top of the league and go to one of the worst teams in the division last season. We never get to see that. We often wonder, what would the greats, Boyce, Thompson, Spike, what would they have done? Could they have done what they did at the top teams, Cliftonville and Linfield? Could they do that with a team who was struggling? And so far, Ben Kennedy is saying, give me a cape, look at me fly. Now, this is clearly not the same Ballymena team as last year. There has been a lot of discourse about the players that have come in and beefed out this squad. Takes a bit of gelling. Every manager up and down the league is talking about trying to fit in the new players, trying to get them to gel. But he really is showing the quality that he's had. He's staying fit. He's being impactful. He's in this main man role, not just at the top end of the pitch, but as the centerpiece of this whole team. And sometimes, especially when you're a player like Ben Kennedy and in a team like Ballymena, the opposition manager says, look, we just need to take him out of the game. And clearly a lot of teams will use that approach. But so far, be it Glenavon, be it Larne, they're not seeing the success. I think it really pinpoints the talent he has. Now, reflecting on that game, and this is the frustrating thing for Larne, because Ballymena are able to hold off the attacking threat. And it wasn't particularly a stellar day from Larne from an attacking point of view. But what really, and I'm talking about all the great talent of Ben Kennedy, that goal comes from an individual error. Mm-hmm. And that shows the things that this game could be. It's all about your duels. It's all about your battles. And at that moment in time, Ben Kennedy wins it and he gets the goal. But you'd probably say 9.5 times out of 10, that is a simple header away from a ball into the box. And mysteriously for Larne, they just don't do it.
They switch off for, 10 seconds, a millisecond, and you've Johnny on the spot there to put it away because you have that ability. He only needs one opportunity. He scored a hat-trick, and then he gets the goal on Saturday. And Jim Irvin is looking at the missing piece in the Ballymena United jigsaw because you have that potential threat up front. But the thing about teams going to Larne is that sometimes they do concede a goal in the opening stages of the game, and that sets the agenda because they're chasing the game, and that allows Larne to put on their silky skills, to do this and do that because they're comfortable. But the longer the game was going, you just sensed it just needed one opportunity, one mistake, and somebody like Kennedy was going to capitalise. And it was a great day for Ballymena. Their supporters really enjoyed that. They really are starved of success. But going 20 miles down the road and coming away with 3 points from Larne. I mean, when you get into the changing room after that, Jim Irvin, he gets those 3 points. He looks at it and he says, look, we've got 2 wins so far this season. Okay, we've lost 4. But a win like that, you don't know how that could spur Ballymena United to know that you're going to have Kennedy up there. Kennedy is going to be there, thereabouts. And he is so capable of putting the ball in the net, which really is reassuring to Ballymena United to know that this season. And it has proved itself in the last 2 games. Fair play to Ben Kennedy.
So much of Ballymena's downturn last year was built upon a awful run of form the season before, and they start last season with a run of really difficult games. They never get out of the blocks. Then they feel like they're under the cosh, a lot of pressure, and even in games where they're playing their better spells of football, they always felt like we can't lose this, settle for a draw, maybe stand back rather than pushing forward. They never got out of their shells. And yes, they didn't have the skill and ability to really play teams off the park, but they were nervy. In fact, they almost played better in games where the pressure was off, in those games against Coleraine where it was just more blood and thunder, don't think, just play. But now, with this result, and the Glenavon result was the start of it, but this result right here, it says to them, on any day, we can beat anybody, because that's exactly what they did. They went to the home of the champions and they get their victory. It is 100% more than just 3 points to that Ballymena dressing room. Teams who are expected to be in the bottom six are really starting to fear, could this Ballymena team be for real? Because they've got their belief right now. And you could see it from that goal. The way those fans celebrated, they knew that they had an opportunity to do something really special, and 3 points at Inver Park in the year 2024 is special.
Yeah, for years at the showgrounds, Peter, been sitting there, and I look about me and I think, being a fan of Ballymena United must be one of the most painful, excursions in the Irish League, because I've seen Ballymena United at home, and you're wondering, how are they going to sort of, how they're doing well here, but they're going to at some stage blow up, and there's going to be something, and there's going to be more pain and agony. So the relief that came from that result on Saturday amongst the fans, that'll get them back to the showgrounds next week. And amongst that team, kick on is what they're saying now. Kick on. What more do we need to do? We showed our belief. We went to the home of the champions and we beat them. So listen, the world's your oyster, and Jim Irvine is perfectly placed now to mould that team and keep them going and keep them playing at that high tempo and digging away, because they dug that result out on Saturday. Fair play. And it's great to see that Ballymena can show that they are a team, a match for anybody on their day.
Another big result on Saturday. It was another expression of a team with a nice bit of momentum. It also added to the little seasoning of shock. The winner of the Rodney McAree Jamboree was Rodney McAree. This Dungannon team, I said at the start of the season, they're going to be frisky, they're going to shock a few teams, and they got one of their big scalps finally against a Glentoran team who, despite not being at their best, still gave it plenty against Dungannon, but they stood up, stood firm, stood tall. And there's always a lot of talk that Stanmore Park is a difficult place to come, but usually what happens is everybody wipes their brow and say, oof, I'm glad we got 3 points there, but they really gave us a good game. Nah, didn't happen on Saturday. Dungannon take the early enough lead through a really great individual goal from John McGovern. They are able to hold on to that, still put Glentoran under pressure. I think Glentoran fans know and understand that weekends like this are probably going to come between now and the end of the season, but let's give Dungannon credit. They've had some tough games to start this season and they haven't always got the points. On Saturday they did, and now their fixture schedule starts to open up ever so slightly, and they are the team with the momentum.
Yeah, 6 games of 1-3, and a notable scalp on Saturday. And I say, if it's difficult being a fan of Ballymena United, yeah, add being a fan of Glentoran to that, because they'll get a couple of results and then they'll go down there with the expectation, and then they get a bloody nose from Dungannon. But Rodney has them playing well. John McGovern got the goal and they held on after that. And you look at that game and you say to yourself, did you watch the Glentoran documentary, Peter, that was on the BBC iPlayer? It was about the 3 years recovering Glentoran, and Rodney was the manager at one stage, and I'd never heard Rodney swear, but my goodness, he was in the changing room and he was giving the Glentoran players a very hard time. And I thought to myself, that's the real Rodney. He had them at half time telling them this game is there for the taking. He had them before the match. And then after the game, he'd be patting them on the back because, yes, they got their scalp. But for Glentoran, another disappointment. And for Declan Devine, it's an indication that it's an evolving situation. But for the Glentoran fans, whether they have the patience, to take results like that, because another defeat in their next game at the Oval will start a whole process yet again amongst the Glentoran fans of unquiet and disquiet. So you would have expected Glentoran to win that, but fair play, Rodney. He's got the Swifts playing well. So, yeah, they'll take that. 3 points onwards and upwards for the County Tyrone side.
On that Glentoran dock, forget waiting for Godot. That felt like waiting for Gibson. It's this series of successes and failures and waiting for the cup that didn't come, and how long might it be between now and this new era of Glentoran. I imagine between now and Christmas we're just going to have these ups and downs, and people are going to say there's a few bits and pieces working here and not working there. I still believe this Glentoran team has lots of elements of youth, some interesting play. They perhaps don't have the real dynamic killer players outside of Connolly within this team, and with that you'll have these kind of off days, but you have to give Dungannon Swifts credit here. Every game they've been in, they've been up for it, they've been fighting, they've been playing really good football, and they have to shop smart. They have to be quite savvy in who they pick up, but I think John McGovern picked up by any team was always going to be a smart bit of business. I was surprised he went to Dungannon because I thought a team higher up in the league would give him a go, have a punt on him, because he was a player at Newry that really looked like a class above in a team at the lower end of the division. He is young. He has struggled with injuries over the past 18 months or so. Wasn't a great year for Newry. He had a lot to prove at Dungannon, and recently, I don't think that's 2 goals in 2 games. He's cropped up elsewhere. That shows what he can do from an individual point of view. He has speed, he has power, he has a knack for goal, and he is someone who had hype about him going into it, and it looks as though this could be the season that he delivers, and he delivers big for Dungannon.
Yeah, I mean, but you look at the Dungannon defence too. They've got a really settled defence. So you look at you got Dean Currie, McGinty, Dylan King, players like that. There are seasoned players, and they will play to they will play to a tactical system that Rodney has put them out to play to. And obviously, the whole Glentoran scoreless throughout that 90 minutes was an indication of how strong they are at the back. And then they can sneak the goal, get the goal, well worked goal, and they can hold on. So, let's be realistic. It's a hard place to go, Stangmore Park. And Glentoran, they just have to take the bloody nose, learn from it. But it's exciting for Rodney, for what he's done there. It's his natural home. He was with Glentoran. I love that phrase, waiting for Gibson. The next time Glentoran win that, I'd imagine Van Morrison will write a song about it, and become one of the greats. It's frustrating for Glentoran, but patience, yet again, Peter, is the name of the game in East Belfast, and they are going to get Saturdays like that. But the false dawns, they've seen them before. They just need patience and give Devine a bit of time to gel what he has.
A really fascinating encounter I was at. It was Glenavon against Loughgall. I turned round to somebody just as the game was about to start, and I said, there's one result this is not going to be today, and it's 0-0. My goodness, in the first 45 minutes they really tried to prove me wrong there, because the amount of chances that was missed. I mean, if you look at highlights of that game, there is maybe the guts of 8 chances that should have been buried, that either the ball just wasn't hit particularly well, it was just off target or whatever it was, and both managers were clearly thinking, how are we not winning this game? And into the second half, Loughgall are the team who do grab that goal. Bit of work from Dean Smith bringing on 2 subs, and of course they're the 2 men that pretty much link up to get it. And it felt to me like it was going to be another one of those afternoons for Glenavon. It hasn't been a particularly sterling start to the season for them. I talked to a lot of their fans before the game, and I was saying, this is probably one of those mustn't lose, and they were very strident in their belief that it was a must win. It didn't happen for them. They will believe that they probably should have got it with the chances that they had, but this Loughgall team definitely do not lie down at any point. But got to give credit to Glenavon. They fought back twice to get 2-2. It's probably a result that's better for everybody else around them in that bottom 6, or what will likely be around them in that bottom 6. But a loss here could have been a massive blow for them in this early part of the season. A draw they'll have to settle for, but I wonder now, because I think these are probably the games that Loughgall would have won last year. They're getting a point here. They'll likely face against Glavin 3 more times, so there's not a huge amount to read into, but it does show you that this is a league of fine margins this year.
Yeah, you were at the game. I think most of the games were pretty dry on Saturday up until after the second half. Um, but they talk about the second season syndrome for Loughgall because the first season was a free hit. And okay, the game ended 2-2. They showed plenty of battling qualities to go there to what is, of course, the hotbed of football in Northern Ireland, being County Armagh, that part of County Armagh. But I'd say, Dean will be very pleased. You've got the battling to actually get the point out of it. But it was topsy-turvy. But Jay Boyd placed in high expectation to score goals for Loughgall. But you're wondering, as the season unfolds, is the second season syndrome psychologically something that's there to be overcome? They overcame it last season with the first, straight back down was the mantra that people used to say in relation to a team that comes up, but they proved it. And then on Saturday, you were at the game and there was battling quality shown in the second half to actually get the point. So, yeah, I think at this stage of the season, that draw, other teams will be looking at that and saying, there's 2 points potentially dropped by either side. So it was an interesting result, an interesting encounter. And patience was a virtue, Peter, because I listened in and it did seem pretty dry up until the goals started coming in. But fair play.
Like, for where these two teams go from here, I don't think Loughgall are going to have a similar kind of season like they did last year. Well, they haven't got the points cushion just yet, where they're sitting with maybe 5-7 points above 10th, thinking, hey, as long as no other team goes on a run, we look fairly confident. We have the odd bad result here, good result there. They'll be all right. I think they'll probably be closer to that bottom, if maybe in it. And it's not because they've fallen off a cliff, or the fact that how will they survive without Benji McGee, because as I've said before, in many ways he wasn't there for long stretches last season, and he did grow up the odd time to get some great goals, but they filled him out in the aggregate, let's just say, to steal something from Moneyball. They work. They're clearly a team that are better together than their individual parts. I just think for a team like Loughgall that they have retained the high level of performance they had last year. It's just that other teams that would have been around them have perhaps got better. Portadown, I think, are definitely better than what Newry were last year. We see what Ballymena are. It doesn't look as though Dungannon having a drop-off this year. So games against Glenavon are going to be key. So I don't think Loughgall are suddenly an awful team. And I think I want to actually pinpoint, I know a lot of Irish League football hipsters will listen to this, and I kind of want to, I feel like I got on to Benji McGee quite early, and if I'm going to watch so much Loughgall, I have to pinpoint this player. 19-year-old striker, he got his full league debut for Loughgall on Saturday. His name of Adam Toe, former Dungannon youth player, I believe. You would not think this is a 19-year-old playing his first league game. He really did impress me. A lot of industry, great passing, battling qualities. He will have to see where his career can go, but I thought he could make himself a big staple of this Loughgall team. Seems to be kind of a forward player. He's happy to play out wide or in the middle. Didn't seem to lead the line, especially with Ferris up top, so perhaps in that pocket. But he looks to be one of the ones that they could find, and they'll probably rely on that.
For a club like Loughgall, it's unearthing sort of these precocious talents, getting them in to fill those gaps. And if they're good enough, they're old enough. And obviously, Peter, you saw something on Saturday that there is scope there for Loughgall to utilise this player, and that's what it's all about. But when I talk about the second season syndrome, I look at the table and you take Larne out of the bottom of that equation, because they will go up given their status and their ability. So you're looking now, it's too early. You've Carrick, Glenavon, Loughgall, Portadown, that Mid-Ulster, Armagh triangle there, along with Carrick Rangers at this stage, because one of the problems has been in the Irish League Premiership over the last number of years is that you'll have a top six and a bottom six will start to evolve naturally by late October, early November. And I think teams need to be sort of aiming at this stage. They don't want to be in there or thereabouts at this stage. So getting 2 or 3 wins under your belt would actually improve and get you up that table, so you're not sucked into that sort of lower half dogfight. So a result like that on Saturday, a draw, it really was okay for either side, but 3 points at this stage would have been an absolute bonus. But you saw the game, 2 each. Maybe it was a fair result at the end of the day, but both managers probably went away saying they could have taken more out of it or whatever. But that's the way it is in the middle of September. And it's one game at a time at this stage, but they are looking towards that when that top 6 and that bottom 6 evolves, not to be in that position. So, it is vital at this stage to sort of get those 3 points.
I think it's a bigger point for Glenavon only because, one, it's at home, so that's a bigger game for them. They've been a bit... They've felt quite static in regards to how they play. Defense is going to be a big concern. They are... On goal difference, there would be at the bottom of the table, -6. And the goals they give away very much shot themselves in the foot. Loughgall are a very fluid, joint-up team. They can progress the ball from one end of the pitch to the other. Glenavon feel like a lot of individuals right now that perhaps don't complement each other in the same way. And if you look at the goals, the first one comes with a long throw and a great header from Barney McAree. The other one is... a bit of bootstraps football from James Duna saying, well, if no one else is going to score, I'm going to have to by wrap my boot around it. So they look like a team of individuals right now. That I think it's a big job for Steve McDonnell to try and fuse them together. He's had a lot of injuries. He brought a load of big names back into the team, and slowly but surely, bit by bit throughout that game, we saw Marshall come off, we saw Niall Quinn come off, we saw, I believe, Jack Malone have to be subbed off. Not saying they won't play again, but they were clearly not 100% fit, and he'll need players like that. He'll need players like Peter Campbell, who I thought had moments of real class. One of the truly excellent players I saw on show on Saturday. An amazing ball that completely split the defence, and Dave McDade just wasn't able to find the back of the net with the chance that was created there. So that'll be frustrating from a Glenavon point of view. But I would say the most frustrated manager after 5 games is Stuart King. That's a tough loss to take. A great result for Portadown, finally getting their first win of the season after what many fans will believe has been some great performances along the way. But Carrick Rangers have been brittle themselves. They had this wonderful start to the season, and ever since then they've had some pretty nasty slip-ups and have been on the wrong end of a beating from some top teams. That's 4 losses in a row. It's another individual error. I think maybe any other week that probably is a 0-0 draw or Carrick steal it late. But look, you got to give Eamon Fife from Portadown credit, and I think this is one of the things he has in his locker, to shove off the defender. But I would be tearing my hair out if I was a Carrick fan, because that simply should not happen, and it is a devastating giveaway at that point in the game.
Yeah, I'd imagine it would have been a severe tactical battle at Taylor's Avenue on Saturday. Of course, Niall, formerly of that parish of Carrickfergus, eventually getting that win. But let's be realistic. It wasn't a great start because the Ports Cliftonville, the first game, then Glentoran, they got the draw with Loughgall and Linfield, which I think was, when you look at it, the way that they held in and got that point, and the celebrations at Shamrock Park, the joy and relief at getting that point against the Blues. It's a bit like, slightly a bit like Ballymena getting that result against Larne. Niall came into the Irish Premiership. He brought new faces in, and he knew it was going to be a difficult season. But that first away win will be so sweet to go up to Carrick Rangers and get those 3 points. It will be so sweet for Niall. And it'll be interesting, Tuesday night when he gets them all back together and have a chat and say, look, guys, onwards and upwards. And Eamon, scored his goal well. It was a scrappy affair. But 3 points for Portadown at this stage of the season, after the difficult games they had coming up to now, I think there'll be plenty of food for thought there and plenty of optimism within Shamrock Park over that result, and particularly the Linfield draw previous to that.
Carrick, so much hype around them that this could be the season that they could go one further than seventh. They bring in the big name of Heatley. They also bring in other experienced players like Sean Clucas. And it was about building on that great run last year. And so far, they have been architects of their own downfall in many ways. And that's one of the things you would think. Like, you look at some teams like Glentoran with a lot of this younger spine of the team, and they're probably going to be a bit more inconsistent, a bit more hot and cold. You think with the average age of that Carrick side, that's one thing that you shouldn't have. It should be professionals know how to play the game and be a bit more savvy about it. That isn't going to stop at a big individual mistake, but they're really not killing off games. I saw them in that game against Loughgall, where they were roundly beaten. Like, those two pretty much identical set pieces in one half ended them. And again, it's mistakes at the back, and that is one thing with Stuart King. You clearly have quality players who have been there and done that. Is there a huge amount of tread on the tires? That's the questions that's going to be popping up now when you're on this part of it. But there is a few injuries. They are lacking a bit of pace and a bit of width in that team. But these players, I think, go to Carrick because they have ambition, because they want to be up there as main men trying to scratch and get into the top six. And it's going to have to be them who look themselves in the mirror and go, we have probably let some big points slip through. Loughgall, Portadown. You got to think, we've been looking at 4 points in their minimum, and they've got 0 from games like that.
Yeah, you look at their goals for 5 and goals against 9. Now that compares favourably when you compare that to Glenavon. They conceded 12 and Loughgall on 11. But you say those individual sort of switching off, those little sort of going to sleep, has cost them on a number of occasions throughout the season. And it doesn't matter how many you concede; it's how you concede sometimes that really is the thing that will give the manager, sleepless nights. And if you can tighten up. But then again, on a 90-minute game, I mean, you look at the context of what you put there, tread on the wheels and things like that there. Is there an inevitability that teams, when they're playing Carrick, will feel that they will get that one chance, that one opportunity to punish them? And that has been true so far this season, the examples you've got there. But I'm sure Stuart will get them in. He'll have some words with them. They'll try and tighten up. And it'll be, let's go again, because, a win for Carrick in their next game will bring them up to 6 points. They're back out of that. It looks bad the way it is now, but it's early days, Peter. And there was expectation with Carrick, but let's not sort of, try and judge them at this stage. A few bad results, a few errors is not going to define them. If Stuart can get them in, can identify what he needs to do tactically, well, we'll see where it brings them from there. But I think they're a better side than what we're looking at this stage of the season.
It also just shows how difficult the narrative's been out there that a lot of teams have improved, and that makes this league, particularly the bottom, more difficult. And Portadown are one of those teams. They've moved in. You saw plenty of them last year in your coverage of the championship. There's parts of that team still there. There's plenty of new faces added in, and Niall Currie must feel like he on cloud 9 in many ways. What a great 8 days it's been to get a win over your ex-team away from home, drawing in the way they did against Linfield. They'll feel as though it's justice in regards to how some of those games against Glentoran and against even Cliftonville ended, and they got nothing. They needed to start this season by getting some points on the board, and they've got it. They'll need to use that experience of the players that were there last year in the championship to good use to try and keep getting points early in this season, because there's no doubt they've only got one aim on their mind, and that's staying in this division this year.
Yeah, I mean, the Portadown season, I think we realise it's not going to be defined how they do against the top sides. It's going to be defined how they do against the sides that are around them in that sort of middle or lower part of the table. And Niall realises that. I think it's consolidation is what's required. I saw them playing Cliftonville on the opening day of the season, beautiful sunny day. They went up to Solitude. Cliftonville, they got the goal and they beat them, but they by no means outplayed them. And the last 5 minutes plus time added on was, quite dicey for Cliftonville. And this is where Niall, he'll get that win And he looked at the early part of the season because it was almost impossible to go to Solitude, and they did well. And then Glentoran, but the Linfield game, that shows the battling qualities. And sometimes being battlers is basically what Niall wants to see his team doing, not switching off. Do you recall last season? Portadown had a number of terrible results in the championship. I mean, I was down one day. They went to Ballinamallard and were trounced 3-0. And Niall was getting a lot of criticism a number of times throughout the season, but he has that bounce back ability where he'll not take a knock. He'll go and look at the whole setup and say, what we need. Somebody's not doing this, somebody's not doing that. And he has got that experience to mould that side. He'll send them out against any side in the Premiership, and he'll have his tactics as good as can be. And I'm thinking it's positive for Portadown. Actually, I got a bit of a liking for them last year, I must say, going down, because the day they won the championship, the joy of on that pitch and off that pitch, you couldn't help but see that was a club starved of success and what it meant to Niall. I mean, I interviewed Niall immediately after the result came in from Institute, and I'll never forget it. I'll never forget how cut up he was. He lives Portadown, he breathes Portadown, he bleeds Portadown, and he's there to give those fans something to follow Portadown about. And that result on Saturday, smash and grab, go up to Carrick Rangers and get 3 points. And there's something there in the background that he's doing that's right, and fair play to him.
He is a manager who usually when teams come up, the manager hasn't got that huge amount of expectation. I weirdly think for Niall Currie, this is his biggest year in management ever, and that's from how he sees it as a personal point of view. He never got the chance to do it with Portadown previously, and now he brings them up. He's got a backing of the board, and as much as I know those fans will back him in the sense that they'll want their team to be industrious and to fight and to really go for it, it's getting those points on the board. Right now they're doing it. The pressure will come if perhaps they don't slip away. That run you talked about last year, I'm pretty sure it happened near the start of the season that they play catch up. So far this season, they are ticking along nicely. It's that big M word right now. Can they get momentum based on that Linfield late goal? They've got it. Let's see how the games go on from here. You spoke there about your time following Portadown in the championship. This has been very much your niche over the past few years. You're back there again, giving us all updates weekly on the radio. And last year, the championship was thrilling. It was almost the most entertaining league across the British Isles, that championship last year between Portadown and Bangor and Dundela and Institute. And so far this season, it looks as though it's picking up where it started last year. Lots of topsy-turvy results, thrilling games abound, some exciting players scoring some great goals, and you're the lucky man where you could pretty much, you're getting a reputation for being the man that talks about goals. In that championship, it feels like if you stick your pen in the map somewhere and go to a game, you're going to be guaranteed goals anywhere you go.
Yeah, Desi, our producer, he gives me carte blanche to go and pick a game. And you like to pick a game, you think you'll get goals. At this time, this stage of the season, I like to get around the grounds. And the first day of the season, I went up to Limavady, and I hadn't been at Limavady for 15 years. The last time I was there was the time that Carlos Tevez was in theory going to sign for Limavady. So he went up, they were playing Institute to see if he was going to turn up. And we had a bit of fun that day. But I was very, they were a bit off the pace that first day. Ards beat them 3-0. And I thought they're going to struggle. But hey, since then, my goodness, they have come through, as have Armagh City. And, I look at it. I wanted to see the Welders play Ballyclare last Saturday. Beautiful sunny day. And it was topsy-turvy in the first half, 4-2. In the second half, the Welders kicked on. It ended up 7-2. And Dylan O'Kane scored a goal. I was actually tempted. I had my press pass. The goal was that good. I was going to walk back out and pay in because I felt, the goal justified that. And it was tremendous entertainment. 7-2. I'd never had a 7 in my all my time. And the BBC gets my petty cash sort of for pens for covering the Premiership or the Championship. There'll be uproar, but it is a joy. And I pick a game each Saturday. I was down on Saturday at Clandy Boy. Dundela got the goal. They won by a goal to nil. Full blooded, good crowd, and I'm growing into it. And last season was phenomenal, as you say. And right up to the death, we actually had the Portadown game when they won against Dundela. That was the main commentary game on Sports Sound. And you had 3,500 people at Shamrock Park, and the occasion was brilliant. And then we had another twist whereby I was up covering Anna United against Bangor. They were sort of battling out to get into the Premiership, to get into the playoff, and they cancelled each other out. But half a mile across Portadown, Institute went and scored in the final minutes to get into the playoff. So it was so topsy-turvy. That was a Friday night. The Derry City game was on. So they covered those games on Radio Foil as well. And the sheer topsy-turviness of it was amazing. And I'll never forget when the final whistle went at Anna at the BMG Arena. Both sets of players, they knew what had happened across at Shamrock Park. They collapsed onto the pitch, and it was hard to describe. And that was the beauty of the Championship. Do or die right up to the death.
Well, that team that squeaked into the playoff, because there's so much talk about it. Anna's late push as well there. You have to even forget about it now. But Institute were a game away from dethroning Ballymena and playing top flight football. And after 6 games, all teams have played 6 games. They're the team that's bottom with only 2 draws, 2 points on the board without a win.
Shakespeare, something rotten in the state of Drumahoe. I don't know what's going on there. It's not the same side that Kevin had last season. It's been a difficult start. But last year I enjoyed watching them up at the Brandywell. They played a great brand of football. But they I don't know what it is. I'm going to take a trip up to the Brandywell. Maybe I'll take in a game up there, maybe see the difference of what has occurred, and maybe speak to some of the people up there. They're good people, and hopefully they have a bigger dream, and that's to get their pitch up on the water side, and that's progressing. But Institute, a great football team and a great football side. They haven't won so far this season, so something is not 100% in that part, in the Drumahoe side. But we'll see where that takes them.
One of the teams that is rubbing shoulders with them in that area of the table, Newry City. I think a lot of people predicted that it was going to be a difficult, particularly start of the campaign for Newry as they readjust to life in the Championship. A couple of players come and go for them, but they've only had 1 victory out of the 6. That's a slow start. We talked about Portadown's slow start last year, so we're not discounting them just yet. The expectations on Newry were to hopefully be up and around there. It hasn't happened so far. Shows you that this is a very tough league, up and down throughout it, and Newry to find it the way they have kind of shows that there's plenty of quality in it that can do damage against you.
Yeah, I mean, but look at that result on Friday night, 4-5 in favour of Bangor down there. I tweeted, for goodness sake, if you got an hour or sort of an afternoon to spare, go and watch a Championship game. I mean, if you're a manager, it would have been an absolute nightmare to watch. And I'm sure there was plenty of finger pointing going on in the changing room after. But, Bangor's an enigma as well, because, we thought at this stage of the season they'd be on top. But you can see that the Championship is just bonkers in a way, because any team, it doesn't matter where you are, will give a performance of their lifetime on any given Friday night or a Saturday, and you can't predict it. Newry could go and get a couple of wins under their belt, go right up that table. We don't know. It's too early to say so. But there's a dynamic there in that sort of league, whereas anybody on their day will beat anybody else or give them a game. And, Welders are doing well so far. But, I mean, Dundela beat them. So let's give it a while to settle in, and let's give Newry a few weeks before we sort of say, maybe sort of give judgment on the Newry situation. But it would be an awful loss to local soccer yet again to see Newry drop out of the Championship. Always loved going down there, and let's just wait and see. Hopefully, we'll get a game in Newry in the next couple of weeks, and we'll get a bit of an insight into what the setup and things are happening at the club.
Let's say it out loud. Bangor were, before the start of the season, favourites. I think they still are favourites. They came close last year. They kept a majority of that squad together, added in some names like Robbie Garrett. They added in one of the big signings of that window, Matthew Ferguson, and he is pumping the goals in for them. Different kind of feeling for Bangor. It's the pressure. I think they know there's a bit of expectation on them to do it, but if they are going to do it, there's plenty of teams to fight off. In the same way that Bangor went up, used that momentum of going up from the PIL, they use it into the championship. That looks as though what Limavady and to a lesser extent Armagh City have done this year. I think Limavady have also been the other benefactors of this great Coleraine exodus. They've picked up plenty of players with experience, and that's been a little project that's been bubbling underneath there last season. They've come up, and 4 wins in a row shows that they do mean business. And outside of them, Dundela looked to be up and around. That's what the table says. Anna started bright, somewhat fallen away, even though it's a stretch of only 6 games. But sitting top of the table, they were expected to be one of the big teams to challenge Portadown last year. It never really came to fruition. Manager Paul Key was feeling the pressure. You could see that. They backed him, and they put their trust in them. And so far, 13 points, he's top of the table.
Yeah, they were a joy to behold when I saw them against Ballyclare. And I don't know whether is it the fact that, that the Welders played such good football, or was it an off day for Ballyclare? I'd like to think when I saw the plethora of skills and ability up front that the Welders had. I know they lost Matthew Ferguson. He's gone to Bangor. Bangor were a bit like Portadown in my view, because Portadown were expected to come up last year, and they had a few setbacks. And Bangor have had a few setbacks, a couple of setbacks early on, but you feel that they will go on a run and go up that table. A result like that last Friday against Newry, it could have ended up 4 each. I was watching it on Twitter, and I knew that Bangor would come back, and they did. And they are expected to come up from that division. But it's interesting. Limavady have got that bounce from Coleraine. I'd mentioned that at the start of the season. Dundela now have that. It's resolved now about if they do actually go up, they will if they do get into that position, they will aim to get into the Premiership, which last year, that was it was an awful dampener to the Championship, I felt, when the news broke that Dundela would not be the ground was too small for a start, but there are ground sharing options there in East Belfast. And that may be something that Dundela, now the players go out there and the management go out there, they know that ultimately, if they win or get into a playoff, they will be going up. So that's a bit of a monkey off the back of that club, and we'll see where that takes them at the end of the season. But I saw them on Saturday. I was impressed because Ards had started well, but Dundela were a hard side to break down, hard team to beat, and they're chugging along nicely at this time of the season.
He scored some great goals. He scored plenty of goals. If I'm going to hear and try and claim I told you so for any great success of a young Adam Toe, I've got to point out a player that you've talked to me about, Tiernan O'Connor for Harlandborough Welders. I don't know how much of an open secret he is, but he is one of the best young strikers in that league. I'm flabbergasted that he wasn't nicked away, or a team really did a big push, especially for the bottom of the top division right now. A lot of teams are crying out for strikers. He's showed so far this season. He is poised, he has skill, he has ability, and what goals he scored this season.
Yeah, so I scored the first one against Ballyclare. He took it with aplomb is the word. But just to see the poise, you know that this guy has got maturity on the pitch. He's got a smart head on him. And you're absolutely right, because his name is being bandied about as somebody, because you look at the guys who have come up from Jordan Jenkins, from the Championship.
Look at what he's doing for Glentoran this year. Like, people cannot poo-poo the Championship in the same way. He played great, and people didn't believe he could step up. Glentoran believed in him, gave him that contract, And what a wonder goal he scored the other week. So, like,
Yeah, I hadn't, remember scoring a goal like that in the street once, but the television wasn't there. It was a Matty Burrows, if we think back to 2010 effort. But the way he took that, the points, but I had seen him do that last season. And Glentoran obviously saw that, that ability there. And, there'll be Van Morrison will probably write a song about that goal coming up at some stage. It was stupendous, top drawer, perfect. And O'Connor, yeah, watch the space come January.
Barry, people definitely, I think, listening to this podcast will know of you from being a reporter on the radio, this fountain of Irish League knowledge, and you've really put that to the test recently. And I really appreciate that you're going to share some of this with me. Working on a book, I think it sounds exactly like a dream for any Irish League fan. Tell me about it, because it's coming out next year, but some of these little tidbits in there are very, very interesting.
You're sitting every week in the press box for the last number of years, and you're hearing stories. You've got parents and grandparents who talk about things about local soccer. So I was asked by the History Press to write the Little Book of Irish Football, and as it was in the beginning, I decided to go from the start, 1880. It was a 32 county thing. And I just covered all these stories, north and south. But some of the tidbits that I have got from local soccer over the years. The first one, the only FA Cup game ever played on a Christmas Day was played in Belfast in 1888. Linfield played Cliftonville in a qualifying tie for the first round proper at the Cliftonville Cricket Ground. That's just before Solitude was built. It's on the left-hand side. It's now a school and a Gaelic pitch there. But what happened was Linfield won the game 5-0, and they qualified for the first round proper, where they drew Nottingham Forest away, and they drew 2 each. So the replay came to Belfast to Ballinaffy, which I believe is the Ulidia sports ground up there on the Armour Road. But before the game, there was 7,000 people who went to the game. And before the game, Nottingham Forest put in an objection because William Johnston, who played for Linfield, had not been registered for over a month, and he played in the first game. So what happened was they said they were putting an objection, and Linfield were going to be put out of the FA Cup. So the board of directors of Linfield and Forest sat down and they came up with a plan, but they wouldn't tell the players or the spectators that Linfield had been put out of the cup. 7,000 people turned up, and I'm sure the directors in the stand of Linfield, their faces must have been white because they thought that Forest would beat them. And on the Monday, they would announce that, sure, was null and void. Linfield were going to be put out. Linfield beat Forest 3-1. And there was celebrations all over Belfast that night because an English side had been beaten. But then the news began to break in the evening that Linfield had been disqualified, and there was uproar in the papers about how could they do this. And there was a cartoon in the Ireland Saturday Night, the Ulster, of the Linfield directors with bags of money. And that was basically, it was called the ghost game of the FA Cup. And Linfield were involved in it. Eventually, their supporters forgave them for actually, not telling them what was happening. But these are the fascinating little stories, Peter, that I would like to bring out in the book that we don't think about. And every ground you go to, whether it's Solitude and whatever, there's 1,000 stories out there. Absolutely. And I hope to bring those out.
One of the real legends of covering the Irish League is the late Malcolm Brodie. I think I've got a book somewhere behind me of like his guide to Irish League football from the year dot to like 1994 or something. And, I see you've got a piece here, and that tradition kind of continued on in regards to Irish League players and the rating they would get after their performance on a Saturday.
Malcolm the Doyen, I can still remember him in the press box at Windsor Park, in the press box at Mornview. His experience over the years, he came over from Scotland during the war, and he made his home here. But Malcolm, had 1,000 stories. I would recommend John Laverty's book, the book is Malcolm Brodie and Me. And it's telling the story about him in the Telegraph with Malcolm. But Stephen Bacon told this story one day. We used to have great crack in the press box at Warren Point. And we all used to have, we're all sitting there and they would tell yarns and stories. And he tells a story about there was a famous Linfield player in the 60s. And Linfield had been beaten at Portadown. And whatever paper Malcolm was doing, if Forbes, the Ireland Saturday Night, or whoever, they were giving marks out of 10 to the players. And this particular player got a 3 out of 10. And he opens his paper on the Monday and he sees 3 out of 10. He's right, that's it. So at 2 o'clock the next Saturday at Windsor Park, Malcolm's there. And the next thing, the door kicks open in the press box. And the players up, Malcolm, what are you playing at? What are you playing at? 3 out of 10. Malcolm says in a Scottish, well, it's just, I call it as I see it. And the fella says, 3 out of 10. Did you not see the shot I had off the crossbar in the first half? And then I cleared the ball off the line in the second, and you give me 3. And Malcolm pauses. He says, aye, that's what brought you up to a 3. So...
This is it's not your first piece of work either, Barry. You know, if people need to kind of look into stuff you've already done, there's been a lot of interest in kind of the history of Belfast Celtic, but you're a man who spent a lot of time looking into them. It's a part of Irish football which is a dark and not quite pleasant part of Northern Irish history. Forget this, Northern Irish football history, but it's something that still intrigues people, doesn't it?
It does. I mean, I enjoyed writing that. And I say it's the mystery that will never go away, because we don't really know what the decision was or why they left a very financially sound football club, and it ended up the Greyhound Stadium until 1983. I had the pleasure of being a kennel boy there in my youth and walking around this massive arena, which was covered in weeds, on the pitch with the greyhounds. You used to walk them around before you brought them to the traps. And it just gave me this fascination. And some of the players who were legends in their own, streets. And one of those players was Charlie Tully, of course. A lovely story about Charlie Tully. He went to Glasgow Celtic whenever Celtic were winding down in Belfast. And he came back and he managed Bangor. And in 1970, Bangor won the County Antrim Shield. And they'd beaten close rivals Ards in the final. And the crowd's coming onto the pitch and they're cheering the players off. And Charlie Tully was a very witty individual. So they've got the shield and they're going round. And some young lad shouts, Mr. Tully, does that mean we're getting into Europe? And Tully says, we've won the Antrim Shield. That doesn't even get us into County Antrim. So witty as ever, yeah. The famous one was where he went up to Alf Ramsey. Charlie was great taking the corners. He went up to Alf Ramsey before Northern Ireland, England International. And he says, as he looked in the face, he says, do you know my face, Mr. Ramsey? He says, I sure do, Mr. Tully. He says, well, remember it, because you'll never see me in a green shirt again, because this is going to be your last international. There are 1,000 witty stories out there, but I just want to tell you one thing. When you think about it, you think about Larne going into Europe and the glory days whenever an Irish League club who won the European Cup went into the draw, and you'd 32 teams or whatever, and you could get Manchester United. Shamrock Rovers got Manchester United in the first round the year that United of the Munich air crash. But Glentoran got Benfica in 1967, and the Oval 45,000. I'm sure health and safety would have had a nightmare now. And you had Eusebio, this team of stars, were staying up in the what they call the hotel. It's not a hotel anymore, the Park Avenue. And this was the biggest thing since sliced bread. And Glentoran drew 1 each with Benfica at the Oval. And it was Eusebio scored with 8 minutes to go. Now, this is where the irony comes in. And the second leg, it was a draw, 0-0 out in the Stadium of Light. And it was the first time ever any club, because that rule had been brought in about away goals, and Glentoran were put out. Benfica went the whole way to the final that year against Manchester United. And the irony is that it was a boyhood Glentoran fan in George Best who scored a decisive second goal against Benfica in that final, the second goal. And the irony is that the club that put out Glentoran, East Belfast, Glentoran, the coup de grace was administered by George Best, who had gone to the Oval as a young guy. So I'd say it would have been a very pleasurable feeling for George Best.
Barry, when can people look forward to this potentially being in their hands, maybe on their e-readers?
Well, I've sent it out. I've sent it off now to get the process of getting it proofed and reproofed. We've got illustrations of certain players. There's a lot of stories about Danny Blanchflower, the witty Danny. And it'll be March or April. George Hamilton, the commentator, is doing a forward, and we'll hope to have a launch at some stage, and it's coming up to Easter time. But just before I go, I need to tell one final story about Danny Blanchflower. The famous Ireland quote about "we like to equalise before the other team score," right? And then that came from the 1958 World Cup, and Northern Ireland played West Germany as they were, and they drew 2 each, right? And in the euphoria afterwards, Danny was interviewed, and they says, "What about your tactics?" He says, "Well, we wanted to equalise before the other team scored. Then they scored, and then we equalised again at the second time." This sort of madness. And if you get to the surface of that, there was a guy called Jerry Morgan, who was the Northern Ireland coach, physio, everything, psychologist. During the 58 World Cup, he roomed with Harry Gregg, because he knew after the Munich air crash, he would have been an absolutely, a great reassurance to Harry Gregg. But Jerry Morgan had gone out, and first guy off the bus, and he was a joker. And the German sort of reporter says, "Excuse me, could you tell me what the Ireland tactics are today?" And he came off that line. He says, "Well, we're going out to equalise before the other team score. And then once they score, we'll equalise again before they score." And the German reporter was like, "What?" But that was the devilment that was in that side that went to Sweden, that sort of pushed that team forward, because they had not only ability and belief, but they were there to make up the numbers, and not to make up the numbers, but it was the sense of humour that brought them through all that, equalised before the other team score. So hopefully next March you'll be getting a personal invite to that, Peter.
Looking forward to that. And just to do the plug for now, if you want to hear, or if you want to read a bit more about kind of the talk about Belfast Celtic, as he said, Barry Flynn wrote a book, Political Football, The Life and Death of Belfast Celtic, and that can be got right now.
Well, it used to be in all good bookshops, but probably just Amazon now. Anyway, Peter, thank you.
Looking ahead to this weekend, big weekend, all the teams return, and there's nowhere else we can start. We almost touched upon it near the top of the podcast. Linfield versus Larne. Linfield can create even more space between them and Larne. They've got 2 weeks, over 2 weeks, to have check off that last minute draw against Portadown that ruined their 100% record. I think that was a bad performance from Linfield, but David Healy has had the chance to try and fix it. Can he fix it in a big spot? It reminds me a bit of that game at a very different end of the table between Loughgall and Glenavon. It's a must not lose. Try and win it. That's how I feel for both teams. But a win either way would be the first huge, big statement of the season. It's one of those that just says it's going to be a 0-0, 1-1. But if somebody can get a goal here and hold on, it will be massive.
We talk about the points in the bag as opposed to the games to play. But listen, if Larne were to get a win there, that makes the mathematics a little bit more straightforward for them to get those 3 points at Windsor Park. But there's 2 things, and I'm sure Tiernan and the team are aware of. The David Healy situation is resolved now at Linfield. There was a bit of a question mark and a bit of noise about whether he would leave Linfield. He has reaffirmed his commitment to the club, which creates security and creates this sense of, togetherness again, because that's off the agenda. Plus the very fact that they've had time to, put their minds ahead to this game. And you would sense that with Larne not firing on all cylinders, this is the opportunity for Linfield. And, they will go into this as favourites. But it's what's happening in the background with the Healy matter resolved that will give that calmness and focus to Linfield, in my view. Whereas Larne go in there, a little bit at 6s and 7s, a little bit of doubt there. But hey, they're champions, and there's a reason why they're champions. And as Tiernan will say, there'll be no trophies handed out in September, and a win for Larne will make the mathematics a wee bit more straightforward. We will see.
Tiernan Lynch was very coy when talking about Linfield a week or so ago, saying that this is Linfield's league to lose. They have this big stretch of points. We have to try and chase them down. That was, of course, before the situation that they're in, where they haven't got a win from the first 2 games. There's 3 games between them right now that Linfield have over Larne. Right now, the difference is 12 points. A lot of football to be played. But if Linfield was to make that a 15-point gap over Larne, with Larne having 3 games in hand, you must say that is an incredible lead.
Yeah, 2 seasons ago, we Glentoran, and the Gibson Cup by the end of October, they went to Windsor Park and they won 3-0. And but this season, Peter, Linfield, they have learned from, Larne winning that. It's up to Linfield to come back and do even better. You look at the consistency, 15 goals in 5 games. Compare that to the goal scoring of the other clubs, at the top of the table there. And you're beginning to ask yourself the question. They're clicking up front, Linfield. They've got that belief. And the doubts will be in, Larne will have their doubts. But we come from an era where Linfield had they call it the OBE, over by Easter. And that was Linfield for many years under David Jeffrey. But crucially, because David Healy has recommitted, he has done for a reason that he feels that he's got the ability there to win a league. And not only that, the unfinished business for Linfield is the European, getting into the European playoffs or the European league table system or the league system, which Larne have done. And the money that will bring in, because it's a big business. So they're focused on that. And I think for Linfield, winning the league this year is only the first hurdle that they want to get over, because they know they need to go over the next hurdle, and that's what Healy has ultimately, anything beyond or less than that will be seen as, a failure. So to me, Linfield are looking at the league and saying, right, let's get this done and dusted before we can, anybody else can challenge us. They have a prime opportunity to make that statement on Saturday. If they were to beat Larne, that really does up the ante.
Let's call it how it is. For Linfield, their problem has not been beating the perceived bottom 6 teams in this league. It is getting it across the line against the top 6 sides in this league. They've yet to play one this season. That's how they've been able to amass the points that they have. And this is a big test. And commonly what you have seen over the past 2 years is that it ends up being a draw. Even the games that they're in control, they let it slip. At other times, with 20 minutes to go, on the whole, that sit back and relax and Linfield see it out and take what they have. Linfield fans, despite that poor performance and ultimately result against Portadown, they will be pushing Linfield to try and go for the jugular at home. Larne will feel somewhat like a wounded animal, and in your home stadium you have to try and capitalise, you have to try and execute on the opportunities that are in your hand. I can't back them, unfortunately, and I think this is going to be a 1-1 draw. Larne often rise to the occasion here. It's a big one for Matty Ryan to come in. It's a big one for Andy Ryan to come in and shoulder that burden of Lee Bonus being away. And I think he can. He's shown he's a big-time player, but I'm going to go for 1-1 here, and I think the goal scorer because usually I do predictions, so I'm going to ask everybody to try and predict this out there in the league. I'm going to say 1-1, and I think if I'm going to predict a goal scorer amongst these all, I'm going to have to go for Joe Cooper.
Yeah, Cooper is the class act. He has shown that this season. But let's put this in context. I mean, Linfield know they've got Larne coming up. They're going to Solitude next Tuesday evening. And you have, within the space of 3-4 days, you have got two results or 2 games that could put a bigger, change the complexion of the league completely. So that's why players play, spectators watch, and reporters report, because it's the uncertainty. You mentioned 1 each. I mean, it only takes a split second or a mistake or something. And Linfield got that result on Saturday. Psychologically, that would prove they would go to Solitude on a high. And we could be sitting here, in 8 days' time saying Linfield could have won two or they could have lost two. That will throw this game, throw this table up in the air again. So that's the beauty, Peter. And I think the 1-1 result is a safe prediction, but I'd like to see either side, sneak it just to keep everything boiling over.
It will have such an impact, this result, because a draw is parity, which both clubs probably take right now. Linfield winning would push Larne down even further, big themselves up, but a Larne victory at the home of Linfield pours cold water on this Linfield season that was gliding along nicely, chugged a bit of a stall at Shamrock Park, and for Larne to come in, close that gap, there's a sense of inevitability that Linfield fans will feel, so they'll take that draw. So whatever happens here, it will have an impact. We know that just because it's two top teams, but a win here would be significant. And with that game being played over at Seaview, they've been the team that's just been motoring along pretty well, inspired by this young striker that they've been able to bring in for the season, Kieran Offord. You want to build up momentum. I think Glenavon at home is the type of game that you should and need to be building up momentum. I'm going to back Crusaders here. I think plenty of other people will. I'm sure plenty of people back Larne last week and see how that went. But off a week off, I think Cruz will win out here, and they could build up the points here where they could be evens with Linfield after the weekend at the top of the division.
I saw Offord, and I haven't seen a more exciting player in a decade in local soccer. The guy is a bustling, forward, but he's got skill. He scored a goal against Cliftonville from an acute angle. He went past the Cliftonville defence as if they weren't there, but he 2 or 3 opportunities. It's amazing the way that Declan Cadell, you can unearth somebody from the Scottish League who comes in, he's young, he wants to prove, and he's proving that. And I wouldn't like to be a defender, Glenavon defender, trying to go in next week to try and sort of contain that. But he's got that ability, and he's a player you'd actually go and watch or pay to go and watch. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. At Seaview, Crusaders hard to beat. They'll grind you down and whatever. Even last time out against Cliftonville, it was even Steven, and they still had Jordan who could come on at the to mix things up towards the end. So they still have that other option there if it's not going for them. But hey, this boy Offord, he's fantastic. Super.
I'm talking about him week in and week out. It really softens the blow that could have been such a season-defining injury in Lecky. Him coming in has pushed the team beyond what they had last year, and Declan Cadell will need that after such a frustrating and disappointing European campaign. It's Glenavon at the back. I think I'll let them down. If it's not Offord, I think it will be somebody else in this team that will get in behind and get the goals. Coleraine are another team that had a week off, and they go against a tricky beast. Carrick Rangers fear nobody and will want to get a result from somewhere. Stuart King will have no fear going into this game. Coleraine feel a bit trepid when they play these games. They don't feel like they've really got their mojo going, and against a big bustling team who will fight like hell, I think Carrick Rangers could be the kind of sly bet to go for. I don't act, and I think they'll do it. I think this is going to be 2-0 Carrick and break the spell of bad results. And
yeah, three draws for Coleraine so far this season. I mean, that's noteworthy in itself. Carrick,
it's what they were doing at the end of last season, just draw,
exactly.
draw, and everybody says they aren't getting beat. Yeah, but they're not beating many people either.
Yeah, I know. We've got a new dispensation there. Oran's moved up to the back room and whatever. And there was that period last year where the fans were turning against Oran. I mean, 3 draws could have went either way. But you have a team like Carrick Rangers coming up, and Stuart will, I dare say they'll be told exactly what he felt of last week's defeat. They'll have it all to prove the ability to actually up their game. Nothing to lose in theory. And that's going to be a very interesting game, Peter. I really do think that Carrick could bounce back if they put their mind to it and get the best 11 on the park. Yeah, so interesting.
This might seem like an odd suggestion for me, and I might be prisoner of the moment, but Glentoran going for a second weekend in a row away from home, that Dungannon result in the back of their mind. Kennedy on fire right now. A lot of things tell me no, but I think you need the back of what you've seen in front of you. I think Ballymena can make it 6 points from 2 games and a 2-1 win for Ballymena, and actually what could be goals galore actually of a game.
Yeah, get them on the grass pitch at Ballymena. Get the crowd right, get the crowd behind you in the stand there at Ballymena. And, you've got the Kennedy factor. Glentoran have got that sort of, can they bounce back from last week? And I'd say Jim Irvin is looking forward to Glentoran coming there. Glentoran will bring their fans, and they could turn against the team if they don't sort of show that improvement. Because the thing with Glentoran is that you're only as good as your last result sometimes. And the defeat against Dungannon, you're going up to Ballymena, a side that are absolutely thriving, and they showed that against Larne. So they're going to say, look, Glentoran, we'll take that after going to Inver Park. So I think you could have the match of the day there. You talk about goals. I think if Glentoran score early, Ballymena would come back.
I think Glens need to score early, if I'm being honest. I think we've seen from that game that Larne had against Ballymena had against Larne, Ben Kennedy's is always going to be creeping about, and if Glen score early, I'll back them a bit more, but I think perhaps Ballymena at home could be their first real, well, I got the Glenavon game, but it could be a fantastic result for them. This game, Loughgall against Cliftonville, I can tell you now that I think Cliftonville will score twice. I just don't know how many Loughgall are going to score. Not the easiest of matchups for Cliftonville last week. Again, the final of the 4 of teams who didn't play this weekend. They're finding it tough up top, slightly shaky at the back, but in turn, it's a week where Jim Magilton's been able to get all these new players in, focus on the game plan, focusing on putting them all together. I think they will get 2 goals in that tight pitch at Lakeview. It's just how much this attack of Loughgall can penetrate. And I think they will, but I'm going to back Cliftonville here and say 2-1.
Well, Jim's been playing a lot. He's playing Joe Gormley a lot, and Ryan Curran has, he scored the first goal of the season, and then he's been on the bench and has come on. So it'll be interesting to see. I think Joe Gormley just loves Lakeview Park. Give him half a sniff in front of the goal. Yes, Cliftonville will probably score, but Loughgall, they will score too. So listen, it's the joy. If Cliftonville do score early, the battling quality of Loughgall will come back. They have a bit to prove as well. And Cliftonville this Saturday, they will know going in there. They have a big game coming up on Tuesday. They will want to set that game off with Linfield. Jim has got them playing out from the back, playing a very composed game, a very patient game, but you're going gung-ho when you're playing Loughgall. And if Cliftonville do score early, that's not the game over. They would need to get sort of 2 or 3 on the board, in my view, to sort of secure this game because of the nature of going down to Lakeview Park. So an interesting game. And as I say, Cliftonville can set up this Linfield game on Tuesday, tomorrow week, if they get a win down there. So they'll be thinking tactically what's the best way to go about that. But as I say, it's going to be another intriguing encounter.
You see, when Adam Toes scores a brace, just remember he told you about that for player first. He probably won't start now. Probably won't start now.
He must be on commission.
I feel like now, I think I just want to keep up the gimmick, that I'm just getting really excited. Some random player. No, I was joking. Final game of the weekend is actually the Friday night game. Portadown host Dungannon Swifts. The form table says back Dungannon Swifts. I think probably the head-to-head history says back Dungannon Swifts. A win for Portadown is probably the most unlikely result here. But because it's at Shamrock Park, I'm actually going to do something I rarely do. I'm going to back Portadown here. I think they've been able to drag teams down to their level, which sounds like quite a mean thing, but I think Portadown have a very particular style of play. They want to catch you on the counter. They want to try and make it difficult for you. They want to get you out of their rhythm. They were successful at doing that against Linfield. They were able to do it in spells against Glentoran. if Dungannon can just break through that rather mighty Portadown back line, they've got a lot of big boys back there now, that will help them. But if I think if Portadown's midfield can push this back line back, make sure there's not too much to run on, somebody close down Keelan Dillon, because my goodness, he keeps having pot shots from far out and he's scoring more than he's missing. It'll be a good game for Portadown. I think it'll be another 2-win for Portadown. Niall Currie making it the greatest whatever stretch of his early Portadown career. But go for them, but I can see this going either way.
Yeah. Taking my Portadown hat off, because I as I mentioned earlier about enjoyed their journey last season. You look at that Friday night football. I think that is great for a team like Portadown. The way that they played against Linfield and they dug in, and Dungannon, on their pitch against Glentoran, were able to play their own style. But you're going down on a Friday night under the lights against a team that have a springboard to build upon, and Niall said that. And okay, Rodney will sort of see, the win against Glentoran. It's so hard to predict. But to me, I think, I do think Portadown will be up and at them and relentless. And Dungannon will find a different beast in Portadown than they did in Glentoran. Glentoran playing maybe a composed or trying to break them down, whereas Portadown, I think, will be battling for every ball, throwing it into the box. And the fans will be expecting that do or die. And Niall knows he's got that win under his belt from last week. Dungannon, they're there to be taken. And this would be, if Portadown were to win it, a real statement of, hey, Shamrock Park, this side are not there to be taken lightly. So interesting all the way.
Barry, it's been a delight to chat to you. As always, that fountain of knowledge just keeps on flowing. Like we said, new book coming out in the spring. Plenty of stuff written by you that's out there. Do you know what game you've picked for this weekend? Or are you taking a wee Saturday to yourself?
Those days are over. The bank holiday at the end of August. I sort of confine myself now. And Peter, before you know it, from the beautiful sunny day that we had on Saturday, everybody I was speaking to, footballer, coach, whatever, you may enjoy it now because the fingers will be frozen off you in November, and I'm sure you know that too.
I wore shorts and a t-shirt just for the novelty of it, because I know I'll not be able to film fingers in a couple of weeks' time.
Absolutely. This Saturday, I'm going to take in the Welders, and goodness, who are they playing? It's Armagh City, I believe. So it'll be a first look at Harland and Wolf Welders under Paul Key down at the Blanchflower, and it'll be interesting to see Armagh as an outfit. I haven't been down to Holden Park, haven't been there for years. Always a great place.
Not a long time though.
They always used to judge teams, used to say, by the cup of tea and the sandwich you got at half time. And I don't drink tea, so I always ask for juice. But I saw Liam Beckett was getting the King's treatment in Larne on Twitter there at the weekend. He's getting presented with his tea and his sandwiches and his wee biscuits. And that's what makes the Irish League sometimes is I can't wait to go down in Newry to see Dorothy Taylor. And it's all those people, and we talk about Keith Kennedy, it's all those people who make up the wonderful sport that we have and the family that we are. So yeah, Harland and Wolf against Armagh for me.
Barry, as a final thought, I didn't ask you earlier on because I've spent almost hours now so far this season talking about Larne and Europe and what could have been and what is. But reflecting on the achievement, how significant really is this Larne success? And do you believe that it could have a profound impact? Clearly you haven't seen it in the past few weeks, but how that will be portrayed within local football and beyond, and how then the Irish League is viewed in circles that wouldn't even look left at the Irish League previously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it people have used the word historic. I think it is, but putting it in the context of all those years watching Irish League football, was it even something, let's say, a couple of years ago you thought could have even been possible?
Well, I see what Shamrock Rovers, we've seen what Shamrock Rovers did. I think the year they got into the group stages along with Tottenham Hotspur, and there's been other teams such as that there. The issue is that we in the Irish League have been thereabouts. Linfield, the pain that they've been through, 3 years ago, and I think that impacted on their league season as well. Which we talk about Larne, but I knew it was going to happen. It was thereabouts. Tiernan and Larne, it's a bigger picture, and I followed them from they were bought over and they were going through the championship. And then they got through that hurdle. And it was obvious that the next stage was to get into that group system, which they have done. And I think the other teams, the Cliftonvilles, the Glentorrans, the Linfields, etc., are looking at that and saying, this is where professional football, semi-professional football, full-time football needs to be, because you get that run out in Europe and the dividend and then the trickle-down effect on local soccer as well. I mean, we've been sitting waiting for so much money coming through for a stadium fund for years and years and years. But you look at that, what one club could achieve by a European run. We're in dream world, and I think this has been happening. It's been molded that we're becoming more professional. The clubs are becoming full time, and it was an eventuality that Larne would get through. Let's take that. Let's bank that. And other clubs now, that's the benchmark that they need to get to. But for too long, we've been underachieving. And we will sit down, and Gerard Lawler has more or less said that we need to look at this whole setup. I think I made the point that Cliftonville went into their European tie against a side who had played something like 23 league games since about March. So that's the summer football. And then I'm looking at Saturday, summer football. Hey, I take it every week, but then it rained during the summer. We need to get the structures, but the prizes out there, I mean, it will make a better product. Let's see where Larne go, because at the end of this year, people are going to have to say, look, we're a professional club. This is what we're aiming for. But this is another point. What impact would that have on the actual league if you get 3 or 4 elite sides who are going for that, whereas your Loughgalls and your whatever's, no offense to Loughgall, they may have be the club in Europe from the smallest village or the smallest population in Europe. But when you look at the sides who have gone full time, that is their aspiration. If that becomes the longer term aim, what will that do to the actual league system? And I thought about Larne, and I thought actually after they qualified that the league might have said, right, well, we'll sort of hang back on those games, we'll postpone them. Will they postpone them, coming up to these crunch games as well? That makes a little bit of a lottery of the Irish League season. But we are where we are. The great indifferent comment of all time. But let's just see what Larne do. They could shock a few people, but it's all about the bank balance at the end of the day and how that will trickle down. But the other sides who are potentially looking for a European spot and European glory, they're beginning to get tuned in and honed in on this bigger picture. Peter?
Barry, fantastic insight. Been a pleasure this week. I know the radio is the main way people can find you, but is there any other things floating around there that they can go and find with you now, Twitter, etc.?
Well, I'm just the Barry Flynn on Twitter, and you can find me on Facebook, but I don't use that, and I'm not into that other one. What do you call it? Instagram. Look, you'll hear me on the radio.
Fantastic. We will indeed, and hopefully for many more years to come. Barry, till next time.
Peter, gentlemen.
Kind of stole the lead earlier on in the podcast. Yeah, got TikTok. I feel as though I've been badly influenced by the Around the Grounds boys. They said do it. I did it. I guess it was probably easy that I had that video made and platformed and framed in the right way. And yeah, if you're new here, hello. Didn't expect me to meet me here, yeah? Didn't think so either. But if you are on TikTok, you can follow me. We'll see how many videos I actually stick up. It's Kicking Match. I have Kicking Match there. I have Kicking Match on Facebook, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Thought somebody would have stole it. I don't know why they would bother stealing it on TikTok, but no one did it, so I'm a happy man. You can also take this podcast hands-free. See, I've got the old script here as well. You just say to your smart speaker, hey, smart speaker, please play Kicking Match and Irish League podcast. So many good games coming up this week. Looking forward to chatting to you and viewing whatever your predictions are for this game on Saturday between Larne and Linfield. It is a certified banger and hasn't even happened yet. Have a great week, guys. That's it. Ta-ra!